a werewolf shifter romance written by Katherine Stewart. Prologue. The air in the ancient grove thrummed, a silent song played only for Silas Thorne and his Lyra. Moonlight, thick as cream, dripped through the canopy of sentinel oaks. It bathed the clearing in a silver luminescence, a mirror to the glow in Lyra's eyes that were, in this moment, more wolf than woman. Yet, entirely hers. Her hand, strong and calloused, rested in his own. Cool. Still. The Umbral Pact, their rare and sacred bond, pulsed between them, a warmth defying the night's chill, a resonance deeper than blood, older than any spoken word. Silas, vampire lord of centuries, felt it. That familiar, fierce joy, a contentment that had been his only since Lyra, with her wild heart and silver-streaked hair, had crashed into his staid existence. "They are late," Lyra murmured. Her head tilted, ears, subtly pointed even in her predominantly human form tonight, twitched. The scent of pine and damp earth, her scent, undercut by a thread of unease. It prickled Silas's own heightened senses, the emissaries from her former pack, the ones who had finally, grudgingly, agreed. This parley. To discuss the unprecedented alliance their bond represented. Silas tightened his grip on her hand. "Patience, my wild moon." His smile felt thin. Such delicate negotiations require dramatic pauses. But a sliver of disquiet had pierced his own calm. The forest around them, too quiet. The usual nocturnal chorus, strangely muted. A rustle. In the undergrowth. Not one, but several. Too many. Lyra was on her feet. An instant. A low growl vibrated in her chest. Her human silhouette sharpened, edged. The silver in her hair seemed to ignite. Silas rose with her, his own ancient power coiling within him. Cold. Ready. They emerged from the shadows. Not negotiators. Hunters. 5 of them. Massive. Their forms already shifting, halfway between man and wolf. Eyes. Burning with a feral light Silas had not seen directed at Lyra since the first tumultuous days. And leading them? Kale. Lyra's own bloodkin, his second, her sworn shield. "Kale?" Lyra's voice, a breath of disbelief, laced with a dawning horror. It echoed in Silas's own frozen heart. "What is the meaning of this?" Kale offered no words, only a snarl. It ripped the night's deceptive peace to shreds. His eyes, fixed on Lyra, held no recognition, only a chilling, predatory intent. This was not parley. This was an execution. The attack, a blur of shadow and silver, of fang and claw. Silas moved, a wraith of speed and fury, but they were prepared for him. 2 peeled off, their forms monstrous, their claws laced with something that burned even his ancient veins. Silver, crudely enchanted. He dispatched one, then the other, the scent of their dying blood, acrid in the air. But it was a diversion, a horrifyingly effective one, a scream. It tore through him, not his own. "Lyra!" He turned, a dread colder than any grave gripped him. Kale stood over her. Lyra, crumpled at the roots of the oldest oak. Her silver-streaked hair fanned out, a broken halo against the dark earth. Her beautiful, wild eyes, now fully wolfen in her final agony, were fixed on Kyle, filled with an uncomprehending agony that mirrored Silas's own. Kyle, her kin, her protector. He lowered his bloodied muzzle, a guttural sound of triumph, rumbling from his chest. The world narrowed, that single devastating image. Time ceased. Silas Thorne, who had walked the earth for uncounted centuries, who had faced down armies and ancient evils, felt something within him shatter. The Umbral Pact. Their vibrant living bond, snapped, like a thread. The severing. A physical agony. It ripped a hollow scream from his throat. He fell to his knees beside her, oblivious to the remaining wolves who now circled him. Wary. A hateful hunger. He reached for Lyra, His fingers traced the still warm fur of her cheek, now matted with blood. Her light, their light, was extinguished. Rage, a black and absolute void, consumed him. When he rose, the ancient power he usually held in such careful check erupted, a vortex of shadow and chilling force. The remaining wolves, murderers of their own, did not last long. But victory was ashes in his mouth. Hours later, the first sickly gray light of dawn dared to touch the carnage in the grove. Silas Thorne sat, Lyra's cooling body cradled in his arms, the silver moonlight gone, leaving only the scent of blood, death, and a betrayal so profound. It felt as if the very bones of the world had been broken. He would not forget. He would not allow them to be forgotten. Later, much later, in the cold stone heart of his ancestral home, by the guttering light of a single black candle, Lord Silas Thorne dipped a raven's quill into a pot of ink, as dark as his despair. The first words scratched onto the waiting parchment of the ancient leather-bound book were not a chronicle of love, as he had once imagined, but an epitaph, a warning, a curse. "Let it be known," he wrote, his hand shaking, not with age, but with an unbearable grief, that even the most sacred bonds can be devoured by the treachery of kin, and the moon itself may weep at the savagery of the wolf. The Lunar Grimoire. It had begun its true, tragic history. Alara Meadowlight loved the smell of old books, paper, dust, time itself. That's what it was. And then there was the quiet, a soft hush. It usually calmed that jittery thing living under her skin. Still, today, the silence felt thin, like it could tear, any second. She ran a hand along a row of history books. Her fingers traced faded gold letters. Her body moved on instinct, pushing a slightly crooked book back, perfect alignment, everything in its place. That was her motto. Because of that, her small corner of the Oakhaven Public Library, always immaculate. Moments later, a sharp cough. It broke the quiet. Mrs. Albright, a town elder, voice like gravel, a gaze to match. She stood at the reference desk, tapping an impatient finger. Alara's shoulders tensed. Just breathe, she told herself. She's just a patron. She doesn't know. Before she could move, though, her nose twitched. A faint Swedish smell, old perfume, and something else. Mothballs? Yes, mothballs, from Mrs. Albright's ancient-looking cardigan. As if pulled by a string, Alara found herself walking towards the local history section, not the reference desk. Mrs. Albright's misplaced genealogy request from yesterday, she'd tucked it into a larger tome, Oakhaven's founding families, thinking she'd reshelve it properly later. Truth be told, sometimes her enhanced senses were more curse than blessing, leading her on these little detours. She didn't know what scared her more, people finding out she was different, or people thinking she was just plain odd. "Looking for this, Mrs. Albright?" Alara offered the folder, her voice a little too breathy. The older woman squinted. "Humph, took you long enough. How'd you know I left it there?" Alara swallowed. "Just a hunch," she mumbled. Her gaze skittered away. Deep down, she knew the truth. Her wolfish senses had pinpointed it. From across the room, to make things worse, the full moon. Only 3 nights away. Her inner wolf, already pacing, making her clumsy. Her secrets feeling paper thin. Would this be the month? Would everything unravel? The thought sent a cold shiver down her spine. She just wanted to get through the day, just blend in. Even so, a part of her, a wild, yearning part, ached for something. More. Or maybe just less fear. But then, the man who walked in. He wasn't just anyone. It was Lord Julian Thorne. Tall, dressed in clothes that whispered of old money and older secrets. Dark, perfectly tailored. His eyes, the color of amber in winter twilight, seemed to see everything. Alara's heart did a nervous little skip thump, a regular, requesting the same ancient tome each time, always polite, always unsettling. Today, however, there was a new intensity about him, a coiled stillness. It made the air around him hum. "Ms. Meadowlight." His voice, smooth, like cool river stones, but with an edge. It always made Alara feel like a startled fawn. "The Thorne Grimoire, if you please." "Of course, Lord Thorne." Her voice trembled, just a little. She scurried towards the special collections vault, acutely aware of his gaze, following her. Because of that, her hands fumbled slightly with the heavy key. In fact, he always made her feel like all her carefully constructed walls were made of glass. He was here for that book. Again. Why was he so obsessed with it? From there, she retrieved the ancient, leather-bound volume. Its surface? It felt oddly warm beneath her fingertips today. A faint vibration. She tried to ignore it. She presented it to him on the velvet reading cushion. "Thank you," he murmured. His long, pale fingers brushed hers, for the briefest of instants, as he took the book. A jolt, like static electricity, but colder, shot up Alara's arm. Her breath caught. His eyes narrowed, a fraction of a second, focused on her, then flickered away. As the silence stretched, he made a quiet comment, almost to himself. Some family histories are filled with such potent echoes. One must be careful they don't become curses. Alara swallowed, hard. "Curses, my lord?" He finally looked directly at her, and his amber eyes, they held a sorrow so profound it made her chest ache. It was a sorrow that felt ancient, a grief that had settled deep in his bones. "The worst kind, Ms. Meadowlight, the kind that are passed down, in blood and shadow, until something or someone breaks them." With every heartbeat, Alara felt the weight of his words, resonating with her own hidden fears about her lineage, her curse. He always seemed to know more than he let on. Maybe it was fate, him being here, saying these things. Just as her own moontide anxieties were peaking. That night, Alara couldn't settle. The library had closed, patrons gone. But Lord Thorne's words, they clung to her, like cobwebs. What followed was a restless evening, pacing her small cottage, the scent of drying herbs and old wood, usually a comfort, now failing. Failing to soothe the agitation thrumming beneath her skin. The approaching full moon always did this to her, yes. But this felt different, sharper. As if summoned by her unease, her cat, a sleek black shadow named Grim, wound around her ankles, purring a low, concerned rumble. Later, as she was returning the grimoire to its vault, before locking up the library for good, she felt it again. The book. It was definitely warmer than it should be. Without thinking, her fingers splayed across the ancient leather. A distinct pulse, faint as a captured moth's wing, beat against her palm. Her heart skipped, just for a moment. Then, gone. Just my imagination, she told herself, firmly. Stress. The moon. Yet, she couldn't shake the feeling. This book. Julian's book. It felt alive, and it seemed to know her. What did that mean? Was she losing her mind? Truth be told, her dreams that night? A chaotic tapestry, shadows, and silver light. She saw ancient stones, under a watchful moon, felt the phantom sensation of fur, brushing her skin, not her own, and then she saw those amber eyes again, Julian's eyes, filled with that same profound sorrow. But this time, they were watching a wolf, a magnificent silver wolf, much like the one she sometimes became, die in a flurry of impossible violence, no matter how hard she tried. She couldn't scream, couldn't move. She woke with a strangled gasp, tangled in her sheets, the scent of phantom blood and pine needles, clinging to her. Deep down, she knew the truth. This wasn't just about the full moon anymore. Something was coming. Something to do with Lord Thorne. Something to do with that ancient, pulsing grimoire. And it terrified her. Come morning. Alara's dread felt like a heavy cloak, one she couldn't shrug off. The library air, usually comforting with its scent of aged paper and lemon polish, felt sharp, stale. She didn't know what scared her more, the lingering images from her nightmare, or the oppressive stillness that greeted her. And then, she saw Ms. Periwinkle. Her face, a ghostly white, her hands fluttering like trapped birds. "Elara," she whispered, her voice thin as onion skin. "The vault, it's open." Alara's blood turned to ice. Open? Impossible. She was always so careful. Her heart skipped. No. Without thinking, she rushed past the head librarian, down the short, quiet hall, to the reinforced steel door of the Special Collections vault. It stood ajar. A dark, gaping maw where solid security should have been. As the silence roared, she stepped inside. The air was cold, disturbed, and the pedestal where the Thorne grimoire usually rested? Empty, utterly, terrifyingly empty. Panic, sharp and dizzying, clawed up Alara's throat. Her breath caught. This couldn't be happening. Not that book, not her watch. To make things worse, the faint metallic tang of something unfamiliar, something unnatural, hung in the air. Not magic she recognized, but something that made her inner wolf prickle with alarm. Because of that, she knew. This wasn't some simple break-in. This was something else, something far more dangerous. This was a disaster. Her carefully ordered world? It wasn't just tilted. It had shattered. She felt it, clear as day. Ms. Periwinkle was babbling now, about calling the police, about insurance, about ruin. Alara barely heard her. All she could see was that empty space. All she could feel was the cold dread. And just like that, everything changed. What would Lord Thorne say? What would he do? The bell above the main library door chimed, its cheerful sound a cruel mockery, as if summoned. He was here. Lord Julian Thorne swept into the vault like a winter storm. His amber eyes, usually holding a distant sorrow, now blazed, with a cold, terrifying light. The moment their eyes locked, Alara felt a shiver trace down her spine. Not from the vault's chill, but from him. He took in the empty pedestal, the distressed Ms. Periwinkle, and then his gaze settled on Alara. Hard, accusatory. Between one breath and the next, the air crackled with his silent fury. "Gone?" His voice was deceptively soft, a silken lash. "The grimoire is gone?" Ms. Periwinkle wrung her hands. "Lord Thorne, we don't understand. The police are on their way. The police?" A humorless smile touched his lips, making him look even more dangerous. In fact, it was the smile of a predator, one that knew its prey was already trapped. "And what, pray tell, will your police do about a matter such as this?" He practically spat the word police. Deep down, she knew the truth. He thought them fools. Moments later, Officer Miller arrived. Young, a bit paunchy, looking thoroughly out of his depth. As Ms. Periwinkle recounted the scant details, he took notes, with a stubby pencil, asked about insurance values, and if there were any disgruntled former employees. No matter how hard she tried, Alara couldn't shake the feeling of Julian's eyes on her, dissecting her, judging her. It was awful. He clearly thought she was involved, or at the very least, catastrophically incompetent. Because of that, her cheeks burned, with a mixture of shame and helpless anger. Julian finally spoke, his voice cutting through Officer Miller's platitudes. "This grimoire, officer, is beyond your comprehension. or capabilities. It is a unique historical artifact, yes, but it is also much more. His gaze flicked to Lyra. Some items carry a weight, a legacy, that demands more than mundane protection, Ms. Meadowlight. A protection it clearly did not receive. Her chest ached at the implied accusation. This wasn't just about a stolen book for him. This was something deeply personal, something that cut him to the quick. After that, Officer Miller left, promising to look into it. Ms. Periwinkle retreated to her office, a mess of tears and phone calls. And then, Lyra was alone with Lord Julian Thorne, and the oppressive weight of his suspicion. He moved closer, his presence filling the small vault, making it hard for Lyra to breathe. The scent of him, old parchment, winter air, and something else, something ancient and faintly metallic, like a blade unsheathed, was overwhelming. Under the weight of his stare, she felt small, insignificant. This incompetence, he began, his voice a low, dangerous purr. Will not stand, Ms. Meadowlight. That grimoire is mine. It was entrusted to this library. And this library, and by extension you, failed. Lyra finally found her voice, a shaky whisper. Wouldn't you? His eyebrow arched. Perhaps not intentionally. Still, it vanished on your watch. He paused, letting the silence stretch, letting her fear build. Maybe it was fate that he was pushing her like this, because a tiny rebellious spark ignited within her. She hadn't done anything wrong. Then, his tone shifted, becoming less accusatory, more purposeful. The mundane authorities will achieve nothing. This was no ordinary theft. You felt it too, did you not? The wrongness in the air? Lyra blinked, surprised he'd noticed anything beyond his anger. Before the words left her lips, she nodded, mutely. I intend to recover my property, Ms. Meadowlight, through my own methods. His eyes pinned her. You know the library's routines. You were the last to handle it before. You will assist me. It wasn't a request. As if fate demanded it, she felt a pull, a strange compulsion to agree, despite the terror coiling in her stomach. Because of that, and because her own reputation was on the line, because she felt a bizarre responsibility for that strange, warm book, she found herself nodding again. What other choice did she have? Good. A ghost of a smile, cold and sharp. We start tonight. Do not be late. My patience is not a virtue I cultivate. And just like that, everything changed again. She was no longer just a librarian, but a reluctant accomplice to a dangerous, enigmatic vampire. That night, Lyra met Julian Thorne on a fog-slicked street corner, one she'd never known existed. The air here tasted different, thick, with old magic and secrets, not like the clean-ordered scent of her library. Her heart skipped a nervous rhythm against her ribs. He simply nodded, a flicker in those amber eyes. And then, he gestured for her to follow. So, she did. Her sensible librarian shoes whispering on the cobblestones, feeling like a child, trailing a dangerous predator into its den. What followed was a descent into a part of Oakhaven that hid beneath the mundane, like a dark river. They entered a dimly lit shop. It smelled of incense, and something else, something wild, musky. The proprietor, a wizened man with eyes like polished obsidian, barely looked up. Instead, he focused entirely on Julian. Thorne. The old man rasped, his voice like dry leaves skittering. Long time. You seek something. Or someone? Julian's reply was a low murmur. Words Lyra couldn't quite catch, but the power in his tone? Unmistakable. It wasn't a request. It was a demand. cloaked in velvet. Because of that, the old man's demeanor shifted, a flicker of fear, then grudging respect. He spoke of whispers, of a warlock named Corvus Blackwood, new to the city, with a taste for rare and powerful artifacts. In fact, he mentioned Corvus had been asking about lunar-touched items. Lunar-touched? Like the grimoire? Like me? Lyra thought, a cold dread seeping into her. Even so, Lyra, trained to notice the smallest detail from years of cataloging, saw something else. A discarded shipping label. On the counter, almost hidden by a pile of dusty charms. It had a partial address, a warehouse district, down by the old docks. Her body moved on instinct, and she subtly angled her body, so Julian might see it too. If he was looking, was this a clue? Or just another dead end in this terrifying new world? She didn't know what scared her more, Julian's chilling calm, or the dark secrets this city held. From there, the partial address led them to a hulking, derelict warehouse by the river, the scent of stale water, rat droppings, and a faint, sharp tang of ozone, magic, assaulted Alara's nose. The air thickened with a sense of unseen eyes. Julian moved like a phantom, all silent grace and shadows, clearly intending to enter. But then, Lyra held up a hand. "Wait," she whispered, her voice trembling, despite herself. "Something's wrong." Because of that slight hesitation, Julian actually paused, one eyebrow raised, a silent question. Her werewolf senses were screaming, a trap, not just a physical one, but magical wards too, thin as spider silk, and just as deadly. "There are tripwires," she improvised, pointing to a glint of almost invisible wire near the doorframe. Something her human eyes might have caught in the gloom, if she'd been looking hard enough. And the lock. It feels off, like it's been tampered with, recently. Deep down, she knew the truth. She could smell the recently disturbed metal, hear the faint hum of the wards. How could she explain that? Without revealing everything? Julian's eyes narrowed. "Unusual instincts, Ms. Meadowlight?" His voice, flat, unreadable. Still, he didn't dismiss her. He examined the door himself, his own senses, vampiric and ancient, likely confirming her hunch. What followed was a tense, whispered argument. Julian wanted to disable the wards, force entry. Lyra, remembering the power he'd displayed earlier, argued for a more subtle approach, finding another way in, observing first. No matter how hard she tried, she couldn't convince him to be cautious enough for her liking. Eventually, just as Julian was about to make a move, a dark shape detached itself from the deeper shadows inside. A guard, and he was looking right at them, without warning. A harsh, guttural alarm cry split the night. They had to run, scrambling away into the darkness, the sounds of pursuit echoing behind them. Alara's heart hammered against her ribs. They'd learned nothing concrete, except that Corvus was well defended, and that Julian Thorne was even more dangerous, and perhaps more observant of her, than she'd realized. Moments later, breathless, heart still pounding, they found temporary refuge in the shadowed archway of a crumbling, forgotten church. The full moon, only 2 nights away now, and the proximity to Julian, his ancient, potent vampire aura brushing against her own heightened werewolf senses, was creating a chaotic thrum inside Lyra. With every heartbeat, she felt the pressure build. Her vision sharpened. Sounds became almost painfully acute. "Oh no, not now," she prayed. Her wolf stirred, restless and agitated. She pressed herself against the cold stone, fighting for control, her breath coming in ragged gasps. Julian watched her, his expression unreadable in the gloom. As the silence stretched, heavy and fraught, he finally spoke. You are unwell, Miss Meadowlight? The concern in his voice, faint as it was, surprised her. Before she could move or formulate a lie, a wave of dizziness hit her. Her vision swam, she swayed, and his hand shot out, cool and strong, steadying her arm. The contact, like a brand, a shock of ice and fire. As fire bloomed beneath her skin, she pulled away as if burned. I'm fine, she managed, her voice tight. Just tired. He didn't press. Instead, he turned his gaze to the night sky, where a sliver of moon peeked through the clouds. Some burdens are not easily borne, he said, his voice low, imbued with a profound, weary sorrow. The grimoire, it speaks of bonds and betrayals. He paused. In the quiet that followed, he added, almost too soft to hear. My family learned long ago that some creatures, some beasts, cannot be trusted. Their loyalty is a lie, their nature, inherently savage. Alara went cold. Beasts. Savage. Was that how he saw her kind? How he would see her? The core emotional question, rejection or salvation, screamed in her mind. Yet, beneath the chilling certainty of his words, she sensed not just hatred, but a deep, unhealed wound. His ancestors' tragedy, his child's death. It was all there, raw and bleeding, in the echo of his voice. This vampire, this enemy of her kind, was also a man consumed by ancient grief. Even so, after Julian's chilling words, savage beasts, a strange resolve settled in Alara. She wouldn't let his pain, or her fear, stop them. That grimoire, it felt important, not just to him, but somehow, to her too. The next day, they revisited the warehouse district, but from a different angle. Julian had a new idea. He said some old buildings had forgotten tunnels. Maybe Corvus used one. Because of that, they spent hours in dusty, cobweb-filled basements. The silence broken only by the drip of water, or the scuttle of unseen things. Alara tried to focus. Her wolf senses, on high alert, the full moon. Tomorrow night. Tomorrow! Her skin tingled with a restless energy. She fought to suppress it. Meanwhile, Julian, a study in controlled intensity, his amber eyes scanning every shadow, every loose stone. He moved with a grace, both beautiful and terrifying. Truth be told, she found herself watching him, more than she should. Was it admiration? Or just that primal awareness of a predator nearby? She couldn't tell. Anything, Ms. Meadowlight? His low voice startled her. She shook her head, frustrated. Just dust and decay. Are you sure about this tunnel idea? She didn't know what scared her more, the thought of finding Corvus, or the thought of being trapped down here with Julian. As the moon climbed higher, just like that, Julian stopped. He knelt, his fingers brushing against a section of the grimy stone floor. This section is newer, he murmured, more to himself than to her. The mortar. It's different. Without another word, he began to push. The stone scraped, then grudgingly gave way, revealing a dark, narrow opening, a tunnel. But the air that wafted out, stale, cold, and it carried a faint, almost unidentifiable scent of disappointment? No, that wasn't right. It was something else. Something that made the hairs on Alara's arms stand up. Deep down, she knew the truth. This wasn't leading them to the grimoire. Not directly. This felt like another dead end. Or worse, a deliberate misdirection. By someone very clever. As if pulled by a string, they descended. Into the narrow passage, the air grew colder, and that strange, unsettling scent intensified. What followed was a short, winding tunnel. It opened into a small, hidden chamber. It wasn't Corvus's lair. It was something else. A shrine, almost. To Julian's family? Symbols Alara vaguely recognized from heraldry, carved into the damp stone walls. And then she saw it. In the center of the room, on a stone pedestal, much like the one in the library, lay not the grimoire, but a single, desiccated, child-sized leather glove. Old. Very old. Julian froze. The control he usually wore like a second skin shattered. A sound ripped from him. A sound of such profound agony. Alara stumbled back, her own heart clenching in sympathetic pain. It was the sound of a soul breaking. "Lucian?" he choked out. His voice, a raw, shredded whisper. He reached for the glove, his hand trembling violently. In that moment, Alara understood. This wasn't just about an ancestral book. This hidden room, this tiny glove. This was the heart of his pain. Before she could speak, Julian sank to his knees. The glove clutched to his chest. He was so small, he whispered, his ancient eyes filled with a fresh, terrible grief. My child, my son in all but blood. Then he looked at Alara, and his gaze, a maelstrom of pain, and a resurfacing visceral hatred. They killed him, werewolves, tore him apart, because he dared to befriend one of their kind, a betrayal from within their own ranks, just like Silas's Lyra, in the grimoire's hidden heart. As the truth unraveled, Alara felt her world tilt. The grimoire didn't just talk about a tragedy. It chronicled his family's tragedy, his child's death, at the hands of werewolves, and he knew. He knew she was close to her own moon, her own change, her own savagery. How could he ever look at her, at what she was, without seeing them? The monsters who destroyed his world. The core emotional question screamed. This was rejection, absolute, devastating. Her heart skipped. No, it plummeted. Julian's raw agony at his direct accusation toward linking werewolves to the death of his child. His son. It was a physical blow. The space between them burned with unspoken accusations and centuries of pain. He knew about Silas and Lyra from the grimoire. The book chronicled that specific type of bond and its potential for betrayal. And now, he was looking at her. A werewolf. With that same horror. Julian, she started, her voice trembling. But what could she say? With his scent in the air, thick with grief and rage, any words of comfort would be ash. He pushed himself to his feet, his face a mask of cold fury once more. But his eyes, they still held that shattered look. Corvus, he bit out. The name, a curse. He must have known about this place. He's taunting me. Or, he seeks more than just the grimoire. He seeks to understand that bond, to exploit it, or destroy it. As if fate demanded it, his gaze locked onto hers again. The grimoire contains Silas's warnings, his research into how such bonds are broken by treachery. That's what Corvus is truly after. A beat later, Alara realized the horrifying implication. Corvus wasn't just a thief. He was a vivisectionist of souls, looking for the blueprint of a sacred bond, to twist or break, and the grimoire was his key. More importantly, Julian now saw her as a potential echo of the monsters from his past. Their fragile alliance, built on necessity, felt like it was fraying, thread by painful thread. Because of that, a new urgency filled Alara. They had to find that grimoire, not just for Julian's past, but to stop Corvus from weaponizing its secrets. And maybe, just maybe, to prove to Julian and herself that not all wolves were savage beasts. But how? When the man beside her was consumed by a rightful, ancient hatred for her very kind. The full moon was hours away, time was running out. In more ways than one, as the sky darkened outside their temporary, grimy hideout, Alara knew. They were out of time. The full moon, it would rise within hours. Her skin tingled with a wild, almost unbearable energy. Her wolf paced beneath the surface, frantic. But then, the memory of Julian's ravaged face in that hidden shrine. the horrifying understanding of what Corvus wanted with the grimoire. To twist, to weaponize bonds like the one his ancestor cherished. Perhaps like the one their fates whispered of. It solidified something in her. Fear was a luxury she couldn't afford. Because of that, she had to act. "Julian," she began, her voice surprisingly steady, though her insides were a knot of anxiety. He was staring at the child's glove he'd retrieved, his expression unreadable, lost in a century of pain. "Corvus wants the grimoire, for its secrets, on breaking those bonds. We can't let him have it." He didn't look at her. "And how do you propose we stop a warlock who anticipates our moves, Ms. Meadowlight?" His tone, flat, devoid of hope. Still, Alara pressed on. "The grimoire? When I touched it in the library, it felt warm, alive, like it responded to me. Truth be told, she'd been terrified of that connection. But now it was their only hope. What if it can lead us to Corvus? What if I can use it, somehow, to find him, before he uses it against everything?" It was a wild gamble, a desperate shot in the dark. She didn't know what scared her more, offering this piece of herself, this hint of her true nature, or him rejecting it, outright. Without another word, Julian finally looked up, his amber eyes like chips of ice, yet deep within them, a flicker. Was it suspicion, or something else? "You believe this ancient book will play divining rod for a librarian with unusual instincts?" His voice was laced with a dangerous skepticism, but he didn't say no. In that moment, Alara knew. She had to take the risk, whatever the cost. As if pulled by a string, Julian considered her audacious proposal. The silence stretched, thick with unspoken fears, and the heavy scent of impending moonlight. Eventually, he gave a curt nod. "If you have a way, Ms. Meadowlight, now would be the opportune moment to reveal it, before the night makes monsters of us all." The last part, a low murmur, laden with a meaning that made Alara's blood run cold. Did he suspect? From there, Alara, focusing on that faint memory of the grimoire's pulse, tried to reach for it, with her mind, her senses. It was a desperate, almost prayerful act. And then, a faint image flickered behind her eyes. Not the grimoire itself, but a place. An abandoned tannery, near the old slaughterhouses. A place she knew reeked of blood and chemicals. Corvus must be using the strong scents to mask his magical signature. "The old tannery," she gasped. "By Blackwood Creek. I think he's there." Without warning, Julian was moving, all lethal grace, pulling her with him into the deepening twilight. What followed was a tense journey, through the city's decaying underbelly. By the time they reached the tannery, the moon was a predatory sliver in the sky, and Alara's control was fraying. The air here, thick with the coppery tang of old blood, but beneath it, yes, Corvus's magic and the grimoire. She could feel its faint, sorrowful hum. They found him, not in the main building, but in a secluded cellar, and he wasn't alone. Her breath caught. Miss Periwinkle, her kindly head librarian, stood beside Corvus, her face pale, but her eyes holding a strange, fervent light as she handed him a small, intricately carved silver locket. "This was my grandmother's," Miss Periwinkle said, her voice trembling, but clear. "She said it would amplify lunar energies and protect the wearer from imbalance." Corvus smiled, a thin, cruel curve of his lips. "Excellent, my dear. Your family always did have a unique connection to the moon's less savory aspects. Betrayal, cold, and sharp. Miss Periwinkle? Why?" Alara felt her world tilt again. To make things worse, Corvus then looked directly at Alara and Julian, hidden in the shadows. Took you long enough, Thorne. And you brought the little lost wolf cub with you. How convenient. Her heart skipped a beat, then hammered against her ribs like a trapped bird. Corvus knew. He knew about her, and Miss Periwinkle, how could she? The kindly librarian who fussed over due dates and dusty shelves was allied with this monster? As the truth unraveled, Ilara felt a wave of nausea. Julian tensed beside her. A low, almost inaudible growl rumbled in his chest. His scent in the air turned sharp, dangerous. Periwinkle, he said, his voice soft, but laced with deadly intent. You will regret this? Corvus chuckled, a dry, rasping sound. Oh, I doubt it, Thorne. She's merely ensuring her own family's continued prosperity. Some loyalties are thicker than library paste. Wouldn't you agree? He gestured, and shadows seemed to writhe from the corners of the cellar, coalescing into menacing, vaguely canine shapes. Because of that, Ilara knew. This was it. The fight was here. And then, the pain hit her. Not from the shadow creatures, but from within. The moon. It was climbing, its silvery light now seeping through a grimy cellar window, finding her. Her bones remembered him. The moon, her master, her curse, her vision blurred. Agony, white-hot and consuming, tore through her. She cried out, falling to her knees, her wolf pressed forward, desperate for release. Ah, Corvus purred, his eyes gleaming with triumph. The main event, right on schedule. He held up the grimoire, its pages open, to a section illuminated with strange silver script. Silas Thorne was quite meticulous, wasn't he? Documenting not just the bond, but the breaking. Julian moved then, a blur of speed, aimed at Corvus, but the shadow creatures intercepted him, their forms insubstantial, yet their claws raking at him with chilling effect. Ilara could only watch, trapped in the fire of her transformation. This was it, the point of no return. Her secret would be out. She would be a monster, in front of the man whose entire existence was defined by hating her kind. And she let it happen, because there was no other choice. The pain crested. And then, oblivion. As the wolf surged forth, between one breath and the next, the world exploded back, searing, agonizing awareness for Ilara. But it wasn't Ilara seeing it. Not entirely. Instead, it was the wolf. 4 paws on the damp cellar floor, fur bristling, a low, guttural growl ripping from a throat no longer her own. Senses, 1,000 times magnified, assaulted her. The coppery tang of Julian's spilled blood, from where the shadow creatures raked him, the cloying, sickly sweet magic of Corvus, the dusty betrayal scent of Ms. Periwinkle, and then, worst of all, Julian's scent. Sharp with pain, but sharper still with something else. Something that made her wolf's heart clench. Revulsion? Corvus was laughing, a dry, hateful sound. Magnificent. The Thorne grimoire spoke of such primal beauty and such predictable savagery. He held the ancient book aloft, its pages fluttering, as if in distress. Because of that, Ilara, the wolf, lunged, a blur of gray fur and desperate fury. She wanted to rip the book from his grasp, to tear that smirk from his face. But then, Corvus merely gestured, the shadow creatures, momentarily dispersed by Julian's fierce but outnumbered defense, reformed, stronger, more menacing. They swarmed Julian, driving him back. And then, Corvus turned his attention to her, his eyes gleaming. Ah, the beast reveals itself. How poignant. Tell me, little wolf, does your vampire paramour appreciate your new form? Her instincts surged, and she whirled, seeking Julian. He was leaning against the far wall, one arm bleeding freely, his usually pale face, ashen. His amber eyes, those ancient, sorrowful eyes, were fixed on her, on the wolf, and in them, Ilara saw it, Not understanding, not concern, but a dawning horror, a chilling, visceral disgust. It mirrored the terror he'd described when speaking of the beasts who killed his child. Her world tilted. This was it, the rejection she'd always feared, her deepest nightmare, made real. He saw her not as Alara, but as one of them. A monster. In that moment, the fight seemed to drain out of Alara Wolf. Julian's expression. It was a wound, deeper than any shadow claw could inflict, as if the forest watched, or rather, as if the damp, oppressive cellar itself held its breath. She saw Corvus advance, the grimoire held like a shield. Ms. Periwinkle cowered behind him, her face a mask of fear, and something Alara couldn't name, guilt, or just self-preservation. "You see, little wolf," Corvus crooned, his voice dripping with false sympathy. "Some bonds are simply unnatural, destined to break. Silas Thorne learned that. Your vampire friend learned that. And now, you learn it too." He gestured with the grimoire towards Julian. "He looks at you and sees the thing that destroyed his life, doesn't he? The savage beast. Can you blame him?" No matter how hard she tried, Alara couldn't tear her gaze from Julian. He hadn't moved, hadn't spoken, just stared. His face, a frozen landscape of pain, and that horrifying, undeniable revulsion. Truth be told, each beat of her wolfish heart felt like a hammer blow against an already shattered rib cage. He hated her. He truly, deeply hated what she was, which meant everything was lost. Her secret was out, and it had brought only ruin. The grimoire, their only hope, was in the hands of a monster who knew its darkest secrets. And Julian looked at her as if she were the embodiment of his worst nightmares. With a single glance back at Corvus, filled with all the despair a wolf could show, Alara felt her strength crumble. What was the point? The grimoire was lost. Julian was lost to her. Because of that, the primal energy that had fueled her transformation began to wane, leaving behind a crushing weariness. The shadow creatures, sensing her defeat, began to press closer, their forms solidifying, their growls turning eager. This was how it ended, not in a blaze of glory, but in the ashes of betrayal and rejection. As the silence stretched, broken only by Corvus's soft, triumphant chuckle and the menacing advance of his shadow hounds, Alara closed her wolfish eyes. There was no fight left in her. Deep down, she knew the truth. Her greatest fear had come to pass. Revealing her true self hadn't brought salvation. It had brought utter, devastating rejection. From the one person whose acceptance she had, foolishly, dared to hope for. What was Julian's ancestor, Silas Thorne, thinking? When he wrote of the beauty of an Umbral Pact, all she felt now was its curse, its impossibility. Corvus gestured, lazily. "Finish them, but bring me the wolf, intact. Her unique properties might prove useful in deciphering the grimoire's more resistant passages." The shadowhounds surged, but then, before they could reach her, or Julian, a different sound echoed in the cellar, a low, guttural "ah!" Not from Alara. It was deeper, more ancient, more cold. Julian. He was pushing himself off the wall, his injured arm hanging limp. But his amber eyes, they were no longer just filled with disgust. They were blazing, with a terrifying, frigid light Alara had never seen, an inhuman light. Her heart skipped, not in fear this time, but in a strange, unwilling flicker of something else. Hope? No, that was impossible. Yet, he wasn't looking at her with that light. He was looking at Corvus. "You will not touch her," Julian hissed, his voice dropping to a lethal whisper. It seemed to make the very stones vibrate. "You seek to understand bonds, Warlock? You will learn nothing from this book but your own damnation." In the stillness that followed, Alara felt a confusing swirl of emotions. He was defending her? The monster? Or was this just a vampire lord's possessiveness over something he considered his problem? It didn't matter. Corvus simply smiled. Protecting your pet, Thorne? How touching. And how futile. And just like that, everything changed again, as the battle reignited. But Alara lay there. The fight still leached from her, convinced that even if they survived this, nothing good awaited her. She was a monster, and the one man whose opinion had come to matter had seen it, and she was sure, in the deepest part of her despairing soul, that he would never unsee it. This was her lowest point, the absolute darkness, before a dawn she couldn't imagine. In the echo of his voice, Julian's chilling promise to Corvus, "You will not touch her," hung. In the stale cellar air, Alara, still mostly wolf, but with her human consciousness flickering back like a guttering candle, watched him fight. He moved like a storm of controlled fury, a blur of black against the grotesque shadowhounds, his fangs bared, his ancient power a palpable force. But then, what struck her most wasn't his ferocity. It was why he fought. He'd called her, not it, not beast, but her. Her world tilted, just a fraction. Could it be? After the disgust she'd seen in his eyes, one of the shadow creatures lunged at her downed form. Before she could move, Julian was there, intercepting it, with a snarl that was almost lupine. He tore it apart with a savage grace, then glanced at her, a quick, unreadable flash of those amber eyes. In that moment, something shifted inside her, not just despair anymore, a tiny, stubborn ember of, what? Hope? Because of that, a surge of her own protective instinct, the wolf's fierce loyalty, flared. He was hurt, bleeding, fighting for her. "The Grimoire!" Corvus shrieked from across the cellar, where he was clearly trying to channel its energy, a sickly green light now pulsing around the ancient book. Its power resists. It needs a catalyst, a willing sacrifice of a true bond, or the breaking of one. His eyes landed on Julian, then on Alara. And I see one bond, ripe for the breaking. As if summoned by his words, Alara felt a primal urge to protect Julian, to protect whatever fragile, impossible thing was sparking between them. She felt it, clear as day. Her fight wasn't over. Maybe her true self wasn't a curse. Maybe it was a weapon. And just like that, everything changed. The despair cracked, and a sliver of fierce, desperate resolve clawed its way through. She had to get up, she had to fight for Julian, for the grimoire, for herself. With every heartbeat fueling her new resolve, Alara struggled. The shift back to human form agonizingly slow, but driven by a desperate need. Julian, sensing a lull as Corvus wrestled with the grimoire's power, fell back beside her, panting, his scent in the air, sharp with his own blood and exertion, was a strange comfort now, not a threat. He looked at her, really looked at her, as her features softened from wolf to woman, her clothes in tatters, her body bruised. Alara. When her name left his lips, it was raw, laced with an emotion she couldn't decipher. Not disgust. Something else. You fought. So did you. She managed, her voice hoarse. For me. The space between them burned, not with hatred, but with a fragile, unspoken understanding. Corvus wants to use that book. To do more than just gain power, Julian said, his gaze flicking to the warlock. Who was now chanting, the green light around the grimoire intensifying? Silas Thorne, my ancestor. He wrote of ways to sever the Umbral Pact, to turn its energy into something destructive. That's what Corvus is trying to do. He means to use the memory of my child's death, the betrayal Silas endured, and to fuel it. Truth be told, the pain in Julian's voice was still immense. But now, there was a grim determination. Alara's mind raced. The grimoire, it responded to me before. Maybe I can disrupt him, if I can get close enough. Because of that shared purpose, a plan began to form. Desperate and dangerous. She, in her werewolf form, would create a diversion, draw Corvus's attention, try to break his concentration. Julian, using his speed and strength, would go for Corvus directly. It was a suicide mission. Yet, looking into Julian's eyes, seeing a flicker of trust there, a shared desperation, Alara knew. They had to try. Her instincts surged. This was more than just a fight for a book. It was a fight for their souls. Without another word, they prepared. The cellar air, thick with the stench of Corvus's corrupt magic, and the metallic tang of blood. Beneath the moonlight filtering through the grimy window, Alara focused, calling on her wolf. The transformation, quicker this time, fueled by purpose, not just pain. Bones shifted, fur sprouted, senses exploded. She was the wolf again, powerful, ready. Her wolf pressed forward. Julian gave a single sharp nod. His amber eyes met hers, and for a breathtaking instant in Grease, she saw not a vampire lord, but a warrior, a comrade. As if fate demanded it, they moved as one. What followed was chaos. Alara launched herself at Corvus, a gray streak of fury, her snarls echoing off the stone walls. She aimed for his hands, for the grimoire. Corvus, startled by her ferocity, stumbled back, his chant faltering. The sickly green light around the book flickered. "Insolent beast!" he shrieked, blasting a wave of force at her. Meanwhile, Julian used the diversion, a black blur. He was on Corvus in an instant, fangs bared. The shadow hounds, momentarily confused, turned to attack him. The tension broke into a whirlwind of snarls, hisses, and the clash of supernatural power. Alara dodged another blast of magic, the heat scorching her fur. She could feel Corvus trying to regain control of the grimoire's energies, trying to twist them. She felt it, clear as day. If he succeeded, they were all doomed. With every step he took, Julian pressed his attack on Corvus, a whirlwind of motion. Alara fought off two shadow hounds, her claws and teeth tearing through their insubstantial forms, reforming almost as fast as she dispatched them. As the sky darkened symbolically around the focused point of the battle, she knew this was their last chance. They had to break Corvus's hold on the grimoire. Now, because of that, with a final desperate howl that was both a war cry and a plea, Alara gathered all her strength for one last decisive lunge, straight into the heart of the warlock's corrupted magic. As if the world narrowed to this single desperate moment, Alara Wolf plunged into the corrupted green maelstrom of Corvus's magic. Pain, searing and absolute, ripped through her. But her wolf pressed forward, fueled by a love she hadn't known she possessed, a fierce need to protect Julian, to shield the fragile hope of their bond. Because of that, she howled. A sound not of despair now, but of raw, untamed power, her own lunar essence colliding with the grimoire's ancient magic and Corvus's twisted energies. In that instant, she felt Julian falter, then surge. With renewed strength, his own cry echoing hers. A vampire's battle hiss, a strange harmony to her wolf's call. The grimoire in Corvus's hands pulsed violently, the sickly green light warring with a pure silver luminescence. It seemed to emanate from Alara herself. And then, miraculously, from the book too, as if it recognized its true purpose, its true kin. As the bond pulsed between her and Julian, unseen, unspoken, yet vibrantly alive, the silver light intensified. Corvus screamed, a sound of fury and disbelief. "No, this power, it should be mine. The breaking—" But then the silver light, amplified by their Umbral Pact, the very bond Corvus sought to understand and corrupt, became a cleansing fire. It tore through the warlock's control, shattering his corrupted magic. The shadow hounds dissolved into wisps of nothingness. And then, Corvus himself was thrown back, slamming against the cellar wall, the grimoire flying from his grasp. It landed with a soft thud, near Julian's feet. Without thinking, Julian snatched it up, his eyes, blazing amber, fixed on the fallen warlock. More importantly, Alara felt a profound connection to Julian, a wave of shared strength, of pure, unadulterated belonging. Her wolf soul answered his vampire spirit. The core question that had haunted her, rejection or salvation, found its answer, not in words, but in this shared, desperate triumph. Embracing her monster had led to this, to him. And just like that, everything changed. The fear was gone, replaced by a fierce, protective love. She was a monster, yes, but she was his monster. And he, it seemed, was hers. In the quiet that followed the explosive release of magic, the cellar was dim, lit only by the faint, silvery afterglow clinging to the grimoire in Julian's hand, and the weak moonlight from the window. Corvus lay slumped against the wall, unconscious. Or worse. Miss Periwinkle, a sobbing heap in the corner, her betrayal now a pathetic whimpering thing. Alara's thoughts spun, her body aching as the wolfish form began to recede, the shift back less agonizing this time, more like a tide going out. Soon after, Julian was beside her, carefully helping her, as her human limbs re-emerged, raw and trembling. He didn't speak, but his touch, surprisingly gentle, his ancient eyes holding a new, profound emotion she couldn't quite name. Awe? Relief? Her breath caught as he draped his own tattered coat over her shoulders. The scent of him, of night and old leather and something uniquely Julian. A comfort. Alara. When her name left his lips, it was soft, almost a prayer. Are you all right? She nodded, leaning into his unexpected support. Tired, she whispered, her voice raspy. You? I've endured worse, he murmured, his gaze sweeping over her, lingering on her face, then her eyes. The space between them burned, but it was a different kind of fire now. Not fear, not tension, but a dawning warmth, a recognition. Truth be told, the sight of her, vulnerable and human again after such a display of primal power, seemed to affect him deeply. Because of that, a new tenderness softened the harsh lines of his face. Moments later, they heard the distant wail of sirens. Julian had, at some point, made a call. The mundane authorities will handle Corvus. And Mrs. Periwinkle, he said. A note of distaste for the latter. What followed was a shared look. The immediate danger was over. The grimoire was safe. But what now? For them? Come morning, or rather, much later that same night, after the chaos of police and hushed explanations, omitting, of course, the supernatural. Alara found herself in Julian's ancestral home, not as a prisoner, or a reluctant accomplice, but something else. He had tended to her scrapes himself, his touch surprisingly deft, his concern a quiet undercurrent that soothed her more than any balm. Now, they stood before a crackling fire in his vast library, the recovered Lunar Grimoire resting on a nearby table, its pages seemingly at peace. Silas Thorne, Julian began, his voice thoughtful as he gazed at the book. He wrote of the Umbral Pact not just as a bond, but as a reflection. Two disparate souls finding their echo in the other. He turned to her, those amber eyes now clear, the ancient sorrow still there, but overlaid with a new, hesitant light. I spent centuries hating what I didn't understand, Alara, hating the memory of a betrayal that mirrored his, hating the beast. As if the world narrowed to just the two of them, he reached out, gently tucking a stray strand of hair behind her ear. Her skin tingled at his touch. And now, she whispered, her heart full. Her soul answered his unspoken question. Now, he said, his thumb tracing the line of her jaw, I see only you, Lyra, my brave, awkward librarian, my magnificent wolf. A beat later, he smiled, a genuine, breathtaking smile that transformed his face. My fated mate, if you'll have me. As if fate demanded it, Alara's own smile broke free. This was it, the answer, not rejection, but salvation, love. Yes, she breathed. Oh, yes. And just like that, everything changed. For good this time. Because of that profound acceptance, the last of her fear dissolved. She was Lyra Meadowlight, werewolf, librarian, beloved. And as Julian drew her into his embrace, the ancient grimoire seemed to give off a soft, contented hum. Its tragic history, finally finding its hopeful new chapter. Their new normal, together, had begun. Epilogue. A year later, the scent of old books still clung to Lyra, but now it mingled with the richer, earthier aroma of wolfsbane blooming in the window boxes of Thorne Manor and the faint, cool fragrance of Julian himself. She felt it, clear as day. This was home, and then some. She stood by the massive arched window of Julian's, their library, a soft smile playing on her lips as she watched him across the room. He was meticulously cataloging a new acquisition, his earlier stiffness replaced by a relaxed focus. The lines of ancient grief around his amber eyes softened, almost erased. Because of that constant, quiet peace they'd found together, her own heart felt settled, her wolf a contented presence curled beneath her skin, no longer a source of fear, but of strength. The Lunar Grimoire of Silas Thorne rested on a nearby lectern, open not to its pages of tragedy, but to Silas's joyful descriptions of the Umbral Pact's unique wonders. In fact, they read from it often, drawing strength from his ancestors' love, learning from his warnings, and adding their own observations in the margins for future generations should their rare bond ever be mirrored again. What followed was a comfortable silence, broken only by the rustle of Julian's pages and the crackle of the hearth fire. Grim, her black cat, purred like a tiny engine from his cushion on Julian's favorite armchair, a once unthinkable truce now an everyday occurrence. Maybe it was fate, she mused, that a socially awkward librarian and a centuries-old, werewolf-hating vampire could find such simple, profound happiness. Lost in thought, my moon? Julian's voice still like cool river stones, but now warmed by an affection that never failed to make her heart skip a beat. She turned, her smile widening. Just appreciating. He rose, crossing the room to her with that fluid grace that always made her breath catch. With his scent in the air, a familiar comfort, he drew her close. And what precisely is my fated mate appreciating this fine evening? He murmured, his lips brushing her temple. This, she whispered, leaning into his embrace, into the solid reality of him. Us, the quiet, knowing the full moon rises tonight, and it's not something to dread, but something to share. Truth be told, she no longer feared the change, not with Julian by her side, his acceptance a shield against the world, his love a beacon. Deep down, she knew the truth. Embracing her true, monstrous self hadn't led to rejection, but to this, to him. To a love as ancient and enduring as the moonlight itself. And just like that, everything changed. Or rather, everything had found its perfect, unexpected place. Thank you so much for watching this video. We really appreciate you spending your time with us. If you enjoyed what you saw, we've got a whole library of other videos packed with more great content just like this waiting for you on our channel. So, why not dive into another one right now? And hey, if you want to make sure you don't miss out on our next upload, hit that subscribe button and the notification bell. We'd love to have you join our community and see you in the next video. Thanks again.